Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating recent analysis. It claims to map out exactly how Elon Musk could hit a $1 trillion net worth, right after a theoretical SpaceX IPO in June 2026. We're going to dig into the math, the market psychology, and the alleged political moves that this source argues made this massive, unprecedented fortune possible. Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the first trillionaire, unpacking paper wealth, dreams over fundamentals, the buy, borrow, die strategy, politics and wealth creation, and finally, the societal cost. Let's get right into it. Part 1. The first trillionaire, mapping out a 13-digit fortune. So the source paints a very specific picture for us. It's the NASDAQ, June 2026. And according to this analysis, the very second SpaceX starts trading publicly, Elon Musk officially crosses the line to become the world's first trillionaire. But, what does a trillion actually mean in the real world? Well, to help us wrap our heads around this giant 12-0 number, the analysis gives us a crazy hypothetical. Imagine you had this fortune, right? And you spent $1 million every single day. It would take you over 2,700 years to exhaust it. To put it another way, the source points out that if you combined the net worths of the founders of Google, Amazon, Oracle, and Facebook, they still wouldn't match this single 13-digit fortune. It's wild.
And this time comparison is just brilliant for showing the true scale. Think about it. Going back 1 million seconds, that takes you back about 11.5 days. But going back 1 trillion seconds, that predates human civilization completely. We're talking 31,000 years ago. It really cements just how massive this accumulation of wealth truly is, turning a completely abstract number into something we can actually kind of visualize.
That brings us to Part 2, unpacking paper wealth and the illusion of liquidity. Here, the source asks a really critical question. How exactly is this massive net worth calculated? In this scenario, it's driven heavily by a 38% stake in SpaceX, valued at $2.2 trillion, and a 15 to 25% stake in Tesla, valued over $1 trillion. But there is a huge catch to how this billionaire wealth actually works. The analysis points out a major caveat about liquidity. It turns out only about 0.1% of this trillion-dollar fortune is actual liquid cash. Now, don't get me wrong, that's still $1 billion. But the other 99.9%, it is entirely locked up in company shares. It's not just sitting in some giant checking account waiting to be spent.
So the big takeaway the source emphasizes here is that this is essentially paper wealth. If a trillionaire actually tried to cash out and sell all those shares, it would be a total disaster. The market would absolutely panic. Investors would assume the ship was sinking, they'd flee, and that trillion-dollar valuation would collapse instantly. The wealth only exists if the market perception stays perfectly steady.
Moving on to Part 3, dreams over fundamentals, valuing the future. This highlights a pretty glaring discrepancy in the analysis. SpaceX supposedly hits a $2.2 trillion valuation, even though they reportedly lost $5 billion in the year 2025. So you might be wondering, how does a company operating at a multi-billion-dollar loss end up doubling or tripling in value? To explain this, the analysis brings in economist Burton Malkiel, who has two theories on stock valuation. The first is the firm foundation theory. This is your traditional, old-school model where a company's share price relies purely on core fundamentals, like actual revenue, tangible earnings, and real profit margins. Basically, if the business makes money, the stock goes up. But then you have Malkiel's second framework, the castles in the air theory. Under this model, valuation relies almost entirely on psychological value and the dreams a company sells to the public. The source argues that Musk's companies operate fully on this second theory. One Harvard Business School professor, cited in the analysis, even calls it a financial cult. Essentially, investors aren't buying today's balance sheet, they are buying into sci-fi promises of the future. And the creator tracks a really clear timeline to back this up. We've seen some incredibly bold claims over the years. The Hyperloop back in 2013, putting humans on Mars by the mid-2020s, fully autonomous driving by 2018, and 1 million robotaxis by 2020. The source argues that even though these specific promises haven't materialized, the market just keeps artificially inflating the stock based on the hype and the grand vision, rather than the actual delivered products. Part 4, Buy, Borrow, Die Explained, the billionaire tax loophole. So, if all their wealth is trapped in paper shares based on future dreams, how do they afford to live like billionaires?
Well, this introduces a highly specific financial strategy that billionaires allegedly use to get cash while their money is stuck in overvalued stock.
The source breaks down this calculated procedure into 3 steps. First, buy. You basically never sell your shares because you only pay income tax when you sell. Second, borrow. You use those shares as collateral to get massive, low-interest cash loans from banks. As an example, the analysis notes Musk allegedly mortgaged 236 million shares to get a $12.5 billion tax-free loan just to buy Twitter. Finally, die. You hold the debt until death, and under current U.S. loopholes, the wealth passes to heirs tax-free, letting them quietly settle the loans later. This visually contrasts the outcome of that strategy. According to the cited data, Musk's wealth grew by almost $14 billion between 2014 and 2018, but he allegedly paid an effective tax rate of just 3.2%. When you put that billionaire loophole next to the 20 to 30% income tax that gets pulled directly from an average American worker's paycheck, you can see why the source argues this system disproportionately benefits the folks at the very, very top. That leads us to Part 5, Politics and Wealth Creation, Lobbying and Policy Shifts. The analysis shifts gears here, arguing that hitting trillionaire status wasn't just about clever market mechanics and tax tricks. According to the source, it also relied heavily on direct political lobbying right after the 2024 U.S. presidential election. The creator lays out several major claims regarding this. They allege that a $290 million campaign donation led to some unprecedented administrative favors. These claimed favors include getting special overseas telecom licenses for Starlink and manipulated IPO rules, like a fast entry on the NASDAQ that forcefully funneled American pension funds right into SpaceX. On top of that, the source asserts that brokers were let off the hook for safe account rules, allegedly risking $70 billion in consumer funds, and that 40 different federal investigations into Musk's companies were just suddenly dropped. Finally, we arrive at Part 6, the societal cost, the global impact of wealth concentration. Taking a step back, the source asks us to look at the wider picture here. What is the actual, real-world societal cost of having political and financial systems that can generate $1 trillion net worth for just one person? The creator uses some really compelling data to frame this disparity. According to the UN World Food Program, $40 billion a year, which is just a tiny fraction of this net worth, could literally eliminate global hunger. Oxfam suggests a simple 10% tax on this kind of wealth could lift 800 million people out of extreme poverty. The source even notes a specific instance where the UN provided a detailed $6.6 billion roadmap to save 42 million people from starvation, but it ultimately went unfunded. As we wrap up this explainer, the source leaves us with an incredibly powerful final thought about the legacy of this kind of wealth. It asks us to look past all the crazy valuations and stock market hype and instead think about the real-world impact of that capital. Does history remember the size of a fortune or how it was actually used? It's definitely a provocative question, and one that forces us to really think deeply about our modern economy, the concentration of power, and what it truly means to be a trillionaire.